Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Applications Board. Can I remind you that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording will be made available on the Colliers website following the meeting. Each member of the board must have undertaken relevant training in planning in the current Collier term before being permitted to take part in a meeting of the board. For your information, the next planning training session will be held on Wednesday, the 5th of October. Moving into today's meeting, item number 1, the minute of the meeting of the 28th of June this year, and that is for your approval as to its accuracy. Yep. Item number 2, declaration of interest. Members are asked to declare any interest that they may have in any items of the agenda. It would be helpful if members explained why they are declaring an interest in the item concerned. For the committee's interest, I, as chair, will be declaring an interest in the following item as I am a member of the Carloway Community Council and I will leave the meeting during the consideration of the item. Our Vice Chair, Councillor McKeever, will chair the remainder of the meeting.
Very well, thank you, Councillor Fraser. We'll go straight on to the item and I'd like to ask Maura to take us through this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Before I actually take members through the actual PowerPoint presentation, I'll maybe just take you briefly through the planning report, which has been circulated to you with the agenda. The planning application is for the construction of a new slipway 40 metres in length by 6 metres wide, protected by a new breakwater which is to be formed. There will also be the creation of an access and 6 car parking spaces. The report, which members will have read, sets out at section 5 the site context and proposal. So there's a description there of a detailed description there of the site, along with a description of the actual proposal itself. Section 6 of your report sets out the legislative context for this planning application. So the planning application is being determined under the Town and Country Planning Act, Scotland Act 1997, and that's the principal piece of legislation. That legislation requires, under Section 25, that decisions are made in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. It also states that the weight to be given to any relevant material consideration is for the judgment of the decision maker, and that 2 tests are used when deciding whether a consideration is material to planning and relevant, and they are that consideration should serve or be related to the purpose of planning, i.e. it should relate to the development and use of land, and further that it should fairly and reasonably relate to the particular application being determined. This project is of a nature that it required to be considered under the Town and Country Planning Environmental Impact Assessment Scotland Regulations of 2017. An environmental screening opinion was carried out and it was issued on the 9th of September 2022. It incorporated a recent conclusion that stated that a full environmental impact assessment was not required. Furthermore, this, in terms of planning policy and the habitats regulations, regard has had to be had to a European protected species otter, which is common around the coastal areas of the Outer Hebrides. In terms of the Town and Country Planning hierarchy of developments regulations, this class and scale of development is such that it falls within the classification of a local development. It is not a major development. Section 7 of your report sets out the planning history of the site. There is no planning history related to this particular site. As part of the process of the planning procedure for dealing with a planning application, consultation advice is sought. Statutory consultation requires to be undertaken in terms of the regulations. In addition to that, other consultation bodies who can provide informed advice are also consulted. The summary of the responses are contained in section 8 of your report, and the full details are set out in appendix 3. Public participation is a very important part of considering a planning application, and in this case the application was advertised for public comment in the public notice section of the Stornoway Gazette in the publication dated the 23rd of June. There were 3 notifiable neighbours and they were all notified on the 13th of June. There have been a number of contributions from the public in respect of the application, in particular 11 representation submissions, 7 of which objected to the development, 2 which were neutral in their comments and 2 in support were received. Of those in support, 1 was a petition. The representations raised similar issues and these have been considered on a kind of issue by issue basis within, I think it's section 11 of the reports. Section 11 of the report. Section 10 of the report sets out the policy context within which the application requires to be considered. Section 11 has set out our assessment of the development against the provisions of the Corliss Development Plan, which was adopted in 2018. And section 12 sets out our recent conclusion following consideration of the development plan and all other material considerations. Maybe just take you through the presentation now. Fiona, has this been up? So we did get some very late information this morning, which we incorporated in the presentation. So if I take you to the next slide. Okay, so this slide is really just to give you an overview for those less familiar with the location of Tolstachulish. It's a village, it's a crofting village, and it borders the coast of East Loch Roag. So this is just an aerial view of the village, and the site is on the coast within East Loch Roag. This is just a zoomed in view of that. You can see the village coming in there from the north of the slide. It crosses over the river, and there's a branch that comes down to the coast. This next slide, I'll maybe just while I'm on this slide, I'll maybe just point out on the right hand side there you can see a river coming down. That's a river from Altavulin. This is a slightly closer in view of the slide. So you can see here there are 3 houses in the village that are in relatively close proximity to the development site. There is a kind of stony beach below the sea wall that you can see to the left of that eclipse. And the actual application site is that headland, that kind of triangular shaped headline in the centre of the eclipse. the slide just shows the extent of the proposed development site in relation to the nearest housing. So you can see that the development site is actually not straight ahead, it's actually at 45 degrees, running at 45 degrees from the line of the village road. The slipway, this is just like a schematic which we've just drawn up ourselves just to let members understand the direction of the proposed slipway in relation to the nearest housing. So there will be, the black lines are just projected off the house at number 1A, just to show the kind of relationship. So the slipway is that, the position of the slipway is that indicated in yellow. And the area of land immediately behind the yellow is that which will be excavated in order to create the access, car parking and platform leading onto the slipway. This is the proposed site layout. And if I can just sorry, what is it not? Okay. Okay, so if I take you to the top of the village road at the moment, so top left of the, yeah, here. So the works will basically commence where the area is indicated red. So the first kind of part of the works is going to involve excavating into that rocky headland, which you'll see a photograph of shortly. There will be blasting to excavate rock in that area. And the rock will be used both to form the breakwater and also the foundation of the slipway. Within that area, there will be the access road, there will be the turning area, and there will be 6 car parking spaces, which are all nose in and facing outwards towards the shore. Then the breakwater is going to be constructed of boulders, shown in the black area to the south of the slipway, and the slipway itself is indicated in yellow, and the slipway will run between extreme high water mark and low water mark. Now, while I'm on this slide, I'll also just show you'll see that there are a series of parallel lines through this layout plan, and these are what engineers class as chainage, and they have generated a cross section at each of those chainages. So on the next slide, you'll see I've turned this drawing on its side just to better illustrate how to read the cross sections. So if we go to the next slide, please, Fiona. Okay, so the cross sections are on your left. Chainage 0 is the first of these, and it relates to the bottom cross section here. So at the point that the works commence, there will be an element of fill, which is indicated by that area that's red. So it's the start of the access road will be proud off the ground level as it is at the moment. When you move on to chainage 10, which is the next one, you're starting to then move into the area. So there will be an element of cut into the ground there, but also an element of fill in which the car park will be built. When you move on to the next chainage again, you can see the breakwater is starting to be formed there, and there will be an area of cut where the car park is going to be. As you move further down into the wider, the next section, you'll see again the red corresponds to this area of car park, the widest area, or the turning area behind the car parking. And the breakwater at this point, will be getting more substantial. When you move on to the next one, you're starting to then move into the area where the slipway is going to be constructed. And you can see like the breakwater is starting to look more substantial, but bear in mind that while it looks more substantial, you'll also moving into the shore. So the shore is sloping away from you towards low water mark. And then as you move further along the slipway, each of the sections, you can see that the level of fill to create the breakwater is getting larger all the time because the ground is sloping away towards low water mark. So at the far extreme, the breakwater will be high, but it will be submerged for a lot of the time. You can see the blue lines indicate there low water. So at low water mark, yes, the breakwater will be, the bulk of the breakwater will be visible. At high water mark, only the crest will sit above high water. So if I take you to the next cross section that just shows a bit more detail. So at the extreme, the breakwater will be constructed. It'll be constructed of fill, and it will be the outer skin of it will be covered with rock armor, heavier rock armor, so that it doesn't wash away. And this is looking, this is a cross section looking towards the sea, if you like. The slipways on the left of the breakwater, but it's at the extreme seaward end. I can take you to the next slide. So then these are a series of photographs. So maybe Fiona, if we can just go back to the slide that shows the schematic that shows the direction of the slipway, just to remind members. So if you just remind yourselves just of this is the direction of the slipway from the land, and the area that is to be excavated is that kind of lighter coloured headland, which is below the fence line. So if we can maybe just go back to the photo. Okay, so this is the end of the village road. The existing slipway, which is quite a short slipway, will be retained, and the new access leading into the car park and the excavation of rock will be on this headland. So the car park will effectively be on this area, on this headland, which is to be blasted and lowered to create a level platform. Okay, if we go to the next slide. So this is just slightly zoomed out. Again, it shows the area of the works. To the left, the new slipway will basically almost like run to the left of that. If you see, the screen is cut in 4 pieces there, so the new slipway will basically be on the left of that drawing, existing slipway retained. Some concerns have been raised regarding this breakwater, and I'll come to that when we discuss the representations. Can move to the next slide. Again, like this is just like a zoomed out version showing greater extent of the sea wall and the existing slipway. Go to the next slide, Fiona. This is as we come just slightly further back up the village road. House 1A is the house that is closest to the proposed development. You can see the raised headland there that will be cut down to accommodate the car park. Raesclutch on the other side, and the breakwater at its highest point will be no higher than the crest of that area that's to be removed, and it will run down, into the shore at that point to the left. Okay, next slide, please, Fiona. It's just a slightly more detailed showing the rock outcrop that's to be partially excavated. And the next one, so then as we move further back up the road, this is the view from outside 2A Tosthachullish, and you can see that from this point, slightly further up the spur in the village road, the site is going to be largely not in view. So there's going to be fairly contained views of the new development. And then again, just beyond 2A, coming further up the road again, like, the houses and the intervening topography will screen views. And then this is, if you look at the top right hand, this is if you go on the top road and you cross over the bridge on the other side, you're looking in a long view down towards the small spur of the village, and you will see the breakwater and the slipway only in the distance. Okay, if we can come on to the next slide. Okay, I felt it would be helpful for members to be aware that since the report was published, further representations have been received. These do not alter the recommendation, but I'll take you through them just for the benefit of ensuring that those views that have been submitted by the public are brought to your attention and that you're aware of them in arriving at your decision. There are representations that an environmental impact assessment is required, and that's primarily on account of the fact that there is a survey and potentially conditions required to do with water. As I stated previously, an environmental impact assessment, environmental screening opinion was carried out, and we have issued an opinion that an environmental impact assessment is not required, and the reasoning for that is set out in that report, which is published on the application on the portal with the application documents. Representations that an engineer's report is required. There is no planning reason why an engineer's report would be required in order to arrive at a planning decision. The proposal has been designed by an engineer. As I say, there is no reason for planning to request an engineer's report. There is a proposal that there will be some blasting in order to remove the rock from the area that is required to provide access for the slipway, and also to create the car parking and turning area. There are concerns that it will impact adversely on the seawall, on house number 1A, and on the septic tank. Environmental Health have recommended conditions for blasting. I'll take you through those. And these conditions, the contractor and developer were required to adhere to those conditions. Blasting is designed nowadays by professionals. It will be up to the blast contractor to ensure that the blasts are designed in such a way that they don't cause harm to any neighbouring property. There will be monitoring required as a result of the planning condition. The representation doesn't alter our recommendation. There have also been further representations that state that the distances that are stated in the assessment report, the distance of the work to the property, are incorrect. We have reviewed those and we are satisfied that the distance stated are correct. There were further representations that were unhappy that a late consultative response had been considered. That consultation response came in from the Harbour Master. The element of that response that is relevant to planning has been taken into consideration in the same way that any late representations have been taken into consideration. And again, it does not alter our recommendations in the report. There have been a significant number of additional concerns raised regarding impact upon audit. I'll maybe take you through. You note that the recommendation in the report is that allows for the fact that we are awaiting the outcome of a survey at the time that the report was written. If I can take you to the next slide, please, Fiona. We have been advised just today that the Otter survey was carried out by ecological contractors on the 26th of September 2022. The report is still awaited, so it does not alter our recommendation at this time, but more for members' information. The survey has been carried out at two levels. There has been a very detailed survey carried out within a 50-metre buffer of the development site. There has then been a walk-over survey of a wider area of 200 metres circumference from the development site. The early feedback has been that there is no or minimal evidence of otter's presence within the 50-metre survey area, and that any evidence in that area is only of transit routes around the coastline, but there are no, actual resting places within that area. However, at the limit of the 200-metre survey area, at the bottom of the river, which is fairly typical where you would expect otters to be present, there is suitable habitat and there is evidence of activity. The consultants advised that prior to the commencement of works that this area on the other side of the bay will require a more detailed survey. I can maybe just take you to the plan that was submitted. Again, this information has not yet been published on the portal because it's only just been received. The area outlined with the dotted white, the area outlined in red is the application site. The outline in white is the detailed survey that's been carried out. And the area outlined in blue is the 200-metre buffer. The submission of this information does not alter our recommendation. We are still awaiting the consultant's report. On receipt of that report, we will seek the advice of Nature Scott as to their views as to what conditions could be applied. The assessment has been carried out on the presumption that audit is present, and it is our expectation that following advice from Nature Scott that it will be possible to manage any adverse impact on the species by way of condition. As I said previously, the representations submitted have been considered. They are set out between 11.17 and 11.51. I think it is in the report. They have like a wide range of issues. These have been taken into account in arriving at our recommendation. The recommendation is that if following the outcome of a survey, which we are still awaiting, upon order, any potential adverse effects can be mitigated by condition that the planning application be approved and subject to the conditions that have been set out in Appendix 1 with any additional alter mitigation conditions that are deemed necessary. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Maura, for a very informative and explanatory and well-balanced report, please. Any observations or questions to Maura? Somebody? Thanks.
Thank you. It was really informative. Am I right in reading that none of the houses are permanently occupied, the three houses closest to the PR? It's irrelevant. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Mackenzie?
The three houses are next to the proposal. Has any of the complaints come from these three? And the letter that the councillors got,
Yeah,
was that from one of them?
Yeah, can you put your light on? Okay. Okay.
We were sent a letter, the councillors were sent a letter. Was that from one of these houses?
I believe you were copied into an email that was
Yeah.
sent to us in relation to some EIE comments. The person did not provide their address, but they are, to the best of my understanding, wanting to put that forward on behalf of one of the other representatives.
But it's not actually.
I mean, we try and obviously take the comments regardless of where the person's resident, as they all have equal, you know, weight. I can't give you that person's
No.
specific
Okay,
address, so.
thank you.
Yeah, what I would
Can
say
I
is we
remind you
did.
at this stage, we need to really deal with detailed planning. Relevant anyway.
What I would say is the issues that were raised in that email that was circulated to all members, we have taken those into consideration in our assessment.
Macaulay?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Can I ask if there's going to be, obviously there's a lot of rock, etc., that's going to be needed for that breakwater. Is it envisaged that all of that is going to come from the part they're taking away, the hill they're taking away, or does some of that, or it have to be taken in from somewhere else? And if so, is that going to be quite heavy on the road, etc.?
It is likely that some rock will come in. In particular, it's fairly typical to have to bring in rock armour. What you win out of like a blast is unpredictable, and depending on how the blast is designed, it may not generate large rock. Now the cover of the breakwater has to have a rock armour of a certain size, so that rock will in all likelihood come in. And it is unlikely that all the rock will be won from that headland. So there will be rock. The first condition in the Appendix 1 requires that a construction environmental management plan be provided. And that construction environmental management plan requires to cover how the contractor will manage the construction process, including transit of materials through the village. There's also a dust mitigation plan, which requires that there is, the dust is sheeted. The road is a public road. It doesn't have a weight restriction on it. But, the contractor will require to ensure that any damage they carry out, that they rectify.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Remind you of the recommendations in front of us. It is recommended that if following the outcome of a survey awaited at the time of report of writing, upon order a European protected species, any potential adverse effect can be mitigated by conditions, that the planning application be approved subject to these conditions set out in Appendix 1, with an additional order mitigation conditions deemed necessary as determined by the Deputy Chief Executive. Is anybody against this recommendation, or do you agree these recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you. If that's fine, the other committee, I go with the recommendations. Thank you. Thank you for all who attended, and thank you for your work in the planning department.